G'day there, Ray Corcoran here. By the time this video gets released, we would have bought a new home. It hasn't been a very smooth road to getting this property. It's been very, very stressful. And there's been a whole bunch of stuff throughout the process that I've learned. So in this video, I just wanted to go over 10 tips from a very stressful property settlement. And basically so you guys don't make the same mistakes. And of course, if you like the video, please give it a like. It does help it get more exposure. And if you feel like subscribing, please do so. So the first one is don't believe anything that a real estate agent says. Now, I haven't got anything against real estate agents. I have friends that are real estate agents. The problem with real estate agents is some of them are really unethical, and not all of them, but some of them definitely are. And some of them obviously want to present, or many of them want to present the property in the best light possible. Now, that's fantastic, but some of them end up actually omitting major details which can really affect how much you would pay for that property. And that kind of happened to us on this property. We had negotiated price, then some other information comes to light, and it kind of affected how I would have negotiated for the property. And the ACCC would consider this misleading and deceptive conduct. And I communicated that to the agent. The thing is with some of these property purchases is, you really need to get all the facts, and you can't trust anything they say. And if you want to get something in writing, get it in writing or get it in an email or whatever. But just make sure that you don't trust them no matter how nice they are. It's a shame that you have to do that. But the thing is, you don't know the good ones from the bad ones. Often when you're negotiating on a property, you've never met this real estate agent ever in your life. So you don't know anything about them. You don't know whether they're good or bad. And maybe over time, you might realize that they're a good one or a bad one, but go into it not trusting them. It sounds pessimistic, but just to protect yourself, you're buying in a very, very expensive purchase. And you need to make sure that you are super diligent, and anything they say, make notes of it in your phone or with pen and paper, or even mentally make the note of it. And make sure you confirm everything, and make sure you have documentation around it. So if they say, oh yeah, that thing should be sorted or should be fine, don't believe that. Get them to be like, send them an email just saying, hey, just confirming all these things. And then that way you've got some evidence or proof that they've ever said that. And if they're not comfortable saying that in an email, then you should be very skeptical and you should look into it. Number 2 is going on the council website. So say if you're buying a house in a particular council region, then you can actually search the address of your neighbors on the left and the right, and even, opposite as well, behind you and on the back street. And basically what you can do is you can see if there's any development applications or DAs that have been done for the houses next to you. So what we found was the house next door was actually planning to subdivide their lot and build a house at the back. It's not the end of the world, but it's important to know that, if someone's going to be doing a big construction project right next door to your house from day one, it's good to know that stuff, and it's good to be equipped with as much knowledge as possible. So you basically go on their website and, search whatever council area it's in, and you can go on their website and search for any development application. So you can type in the address of your neighbor. So if you're number 20, you can search 18 and 22. And you'll be able to check if there's anything. It should come up with nothing most of the time, but you might save yourself some hassle, or at least be equipped to know exactly what you're going to come into. Number 3 is being patient. So it's really important that you take your time. There's always going to be a house that is the one, and you might find the one probably about 20 times, to be honest. So don't get what some people would call one-itis, where you're so obsessed with this one house, you kind of forego any kind of negotiating skills and you just want it. People can tell that you're desperate, you really, really want the house. They're not going to be willing to concede any ground in a negotiation if they can tell that you, or your wife or partner, or whoever it is that's with you, loves the house. Don't get so attached. There's always another house. Very few houses are one of a kind, so you've got to keep that in mind. Within a month, 2 months, you'll probably see some other houses that are just as nice. If it's a rare type of house, then obviously you might be a little bit more accommodating. But for most houses that people buy, there's plenty of them out there. Number 4 is making a list of non-negotiables and sticking to it. And I've mentioned this on the channel before, but make a list of the things that you absolute must-haves, and then you can list all the nice-to-haves as well separately. But you really got to, not try to budge on the must-haves. They're must-haves for a reason. And years later, sometimes people can get impatient if their property search has taken a while, and they just almost want to buy anything by that point. And I can understand the frustration. However, you're going to be in this house for, 5, 10, 20, 50 years. Who knows how long you're going to be there. So try to be pretty strict about your criteria and sticking to it, because, you know, this may really affect resale down the line if you kind of go, you know what, it's only 400 square meters. Let's just get it anyway, even though you probably could have got a house with 600 square meters that probably will appreciate a lot better by, you know, waiting a few more weeks or whatever it is, or paying a tiny bit more. Number 5 is well-located land in the best area possible is going to give you the best chance for capital growth. So obviously there's lots of factors for capital growth, but generally the land is what appreciates, you know, houses depreciate. So you want to get the biggest amount of land in the nicest area that you can afford generally. I'm not recommending you do that, of course, not financial advice, but generally that will put you in better stead. You know, houses can become they will become dilapidated over time, and they decrease in value, whereas the land will typically appreciate, especially if you're buying, you know, the best, you know, that's like the worst house on the best street. You know, everyone kind of talks about that. Number 6 is, if the neighbors stick their heads out when you're going for an open home, feel free to go across the road and say good day. It's actually quite interesting what you'll find out from the neighbors. They're usually very forthcoming with information. They want to have a sticky beak and see who's, you know, looking to move into the area. And one thing that we found was we actually found out about what the development was going to be from the neighbors who we ended up having a chat with, and they said that they're planning to do X, Y, and Z. And that was information that wasn't very forthcoming. It was one random page on a very, very big document that we had with the contract, but it was kind of stuffed away and it wasn't made very known to us. They could kind of technically say that that information was provided, but it wasn't very, very clear to us. And I think that was personally, I thought was quite misleading. But feel free to have a chat with them. You know, if you see people stick their head out, say good day, have a chat, how long they lived in the area, what do they think about the area, you know, anything like that. Sometimes you can get one little sentence where they'll say, oh, you know, there's been big dramas with that neighbor or this neighbor, or they're going to be doing some development or whatever. You can get some insider information that can totally change how valuable this house may or may not be. So it's kind of good inside intel that you can get. So number 7 is getting your finances in order and getting prepared in the lead up to actually buying the house. So for me, for example, I was making sure that I was trying to make as much money as possible, have as much cash on hand. I also canceled all my credit cards that I didn't need to use. And I also reduced my main credit card down to a very low limit. And all of this was to increase my serviceability and to make sure that I could borrow the maximum amount possible. And I would only just have a caveat here to say, obviously only borrow within your means. Don't borrow the max just because you can. If you can't pay it back and you can't afford to have multiple interest rate hikes and surprise increases in your expenses, then don't do it. But I was very happy with being able to make those repayments, even factoring those things in. But make sure you're kind of preparing yourself for the application so that, you know, your application looks as strong as possible. So, you know, getting rid of credit cards you don't need, paying off any debt, having as much cash at the bank as possible. If you've got a business, bringing in as much cash as you can lately. That's always good for a recent you know, quarterly BAS. All that sort of stuff helps improve your position when you're going to go apply for a loan. Number 8 is don't count on anybody to do their job. This is probably one of the biggest tips if I could give anyone, especially a first home buyer or anyone that's looking to buy a house, is don't count on anyone to do their job. You know, I've been let down by the bank, the real estate agent, the mortgage broker, the conveyancer. You know, an accountant's been pretty good, but like it's ridiculous. Even the people that were on my side and I was paying were missing major things. And this is crazy because you shouldn't have to deal with that, to be honest. And even good people make mistakes sometimes. However, you should be keeping everybody accountable on your team and making sure that everybody delivers what they need to deliver. And if you have a gut feel that something's not happening or not progressing, or something hasn't been, or maybe you feel like they should have called you by now, like maybe your conveyancer should have contacted you or to keep you updated, call them and keep them accountable. You really need to be proactive with this, because you're the person that gets the biggest downside if all this falls over. Say if the deal falls over or it gets delayed and you have to pay extra fees because you're pushing back settlement. There's all sorts of stuff that can happen, and generally it will be a whole lot more stressful. I've had times with other properties where the conveyancer, we were a day before settlement and she hadn't done certain bits and bobs that she should have done. And she acted like it was all fine, we were going to get it through. But realistically, she was not on top of it at all. And only because I called and I felt like a bad gut feeling that I felt like I probably should have, you know, gotten some documentation by that point, that we were able to address it. And it was very stressful last minute. And I've got stuff to do with my business. Like I haven't got time to be doing some of this stuff last minute or, you know, signing a document with an hour to spare, or ridiculous stuff like that. It was all totally preventable. So these days, with any kind of provider that I work with, I'm keeping them accountable. I'm also staying in the loop with them. I'm kind of helping them do their job, and I don't mind if they don't like it or they think I'm micromanaging, because ultimately I've had this happen. I've had stuff go wrong too many times now in a row, to the point where I do not trust them to get their job done, and I'll work with them to make sure that they're doing their job. They can miss every other settlement with all their other clients. I don't care. But for my stuff, I need to make sure it goes through, because I haven't got time to deal with any kind of BS that pops up. So this is a really important one. Don't be afraid to question what they're doing, or ask them for clarification, or ask where they're up to. You're not pestering them. It's really just making sure that everything happens on time. So yeah, that's a really, really big one. And just make sure that you're fully across it. Regardless of how much you know about property, keep checking in with them. They should be checking in with you to let you know how things are progressing, but many of them don't. Number 9 is make sure you read the contract super closely. Now, this is especially important because most people aren't property people. They're not lawyers, or especially not property lawyers. So they don't think they know what to look for. They're like, well, I don't do this stuff. Like it's not my job. And you're right in the sense that you're paying like a conveyancer or a solicitor to go over this stuff for you. However, you should still read it from top to bottom, because as I said, they will miss things. Even good people make mistakes, as I said, and you need to make sure it's good for you anyway to get familiar with what kind of documentation is within the property contract document. So, often they'll have a PDF with the contract. They'll have stuff like, say if it's a new build, paperwork to do with a new build. They're gonna have stuff like termite inspection, termite barrier. They're gonna have a whole bunch of other stuff that's in the document. Any other relevant document will kind of usually be combined into one big PDF, and just read it from top to bottom, regardless of what you know about property. Just, print it out if you need to, even if it's a big document, or open it up on a laptop, not on the phone where you can kind of easily miss things, and go through it. Just start reading. Just start reading. I don't care how long it takes. Just start reading it, because you might pick up one thing that totally changes what you think of the property, or might change, or you might see something you're like, what's this page about? I don't understand why this page is in here. And you can ask the question, and then they can be like, well, this page is actually to show this, this, and this. And we had this with a property that we looked at. There was one little page stuffed right into the document that just says the neighbor had paid for rights to the driveway, an easement access, basically the right to access the rear of their property using our shared driveway, because we have a shared driveway because there's a house at the back, around the back of ours. That's a massive difference between what you would negotiate on. So it's really important that you go through the document from top to bottom. Don't expect your conveyancer to do it. They will do it. That's what they're supposed to do, but they can still let you down. So make sure you read it, ask the question, and really take ownership of all of this stuff. And number 10 is one that I've recommended in the past, and that is just making sure that you have a really strong A team. So, conveyancer, your mortgage broker, your accountant, anyone else that's, any kind of building and pest inspectors, plumbing inspectors if you need to. Not everyone does that, but sometimes it is appropriate. We did it for our most recent purchase. But make sure that you've got the right people there. You're like a little mini sports team, and your goal is to get this property and get it across the line, and make sure you reduce any risk along the way, and everything happens on time to settle when you want to settle and for the price that you want. So it's really important that all these team members work together, and you need people that, everyone makes mistakes, but you want people that are, less likely to make mistakes, reliable people. Pay them whatever they're worth. Obviously, you don't pay for the mortgage broker, but a good conveyancer is worth their money. I've paid expensive conveyancers and cheap ones, and they've been very hit and miss, to be honest. Some of the most expensive ones have been great, and then I've had expensive ones that have been terrible. And because I'm buying in different states, I'm always using different ones. But yeah, so it's worth paying for good professionals. Same for accountant. If you're not sure like what entity to buy the house under, whether it's a trust or whether it's your personal name, all those sorts of things, they can help you with that. But yeah, it's super important to have the right people in that seat. Don't just go with some random person because you just, did one Google search and whatever. Like, try and find someone that has ideally lots of good Google reviews. Could be a recommendation from some of the other providers that you're dealing with. Your broker might recommend a conveyancer and so on. Ask around with friends, but speak to a lot of them. Don't just speak to one and sign up with them. Speak to a number of them, get a feel for what their process is, how often they communicate with you, and how many houses they've done. Sometimes that can be useful. You don't want someone that's like a one-person band necessarily. Sometimes the big firms are useless because they're just, you're just a number. And then you've got some people that are like, one-person bands, and they're just crap. They're just not good enough. So speak to a few. It's worth taking the time to get the right person in that seat, because it'll make your life so much easier when, inevitably things will always pop up in any property settlement. So yeah, so I hope you found that useful. It's just a few tips from a very stressful few weeks for me. And hopefully that can save you a bit of hassle. Even if one of these tips can help you, it'll help make everything so much easier. And you can get in the rhythm of buying property, hopefully on a regular basis, and build your portfolio and kind of go from there. But yeah, let me know in the comments what you thought. If you liked it, if there's any tips that you thought I missed, please let me know below. And yeah, I'll see you in the next video.